Okay, here we go. Today is day 25. I hope that's right. 25 of our Bhagavad-gītā study. Yes, day 25. This chapter, chapter 15. Oh, I love it so much. It's such a great chapter. This is another very short chapter, 20 verses. A chapter worth studying, mastering. You know, I want to do this. I want to go back and master this chapter, really learn it all. It's really wonderful. Now, we can go back to yesterday, day 14, or chapter 14. And it ended with a couple really important statements Kṛṣṇa made in relation to Vedānta. And Bhagavad-gītā is clearing up all the questions in Vedānta. There's going to be a mic drop at the end of this chapter in regards to Vedānta. We'll get there. But he said at the end of the last chapter, kind of another mic drop, two really important things. Brahman is the subject of Vedānta, how to understand the absolute truth, but what that means and what Brahman is and so on can be a very challenging. It's been up for debate and interpreted in different ways. But Kṛṣṇa said at the end of the 14th chapter, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, that I am the basis of the non-personal Brahman. Brahman is subordinate to him, the person. And he also said that devotion to him is the way, is the means to transcend the gunas and achieve Brahman realization, which is seen widely accepted as the whole point of Vedānta. So so the 14th chapter ended with this talk of achieving Brahman realization. Now, chapter 15 is going to deal a lot with Paramatma realization, right? Another feature. The Gaudiya Vaishnavas, based on the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, have very, very clearly shown that if we want to understand God, the absolute truth, we can understand, and people debate, how do you understand God? It's explained so nicely there that we can understand God in three features. That there's Brahman, his impersonal, all-pervasive, eternal feature, his Paramatma feature, which is permeating all of this material world and sustaining it. And then there's the personal feature of Bhagavan, where you can know him intimately and love him intimately. And within Bhagavan, or you could say it like this, so there's Brahman, and then there's Paramatma realization. Within Paramatma, Brahman realization is in it. And then within Bhagavan, both Paramatma realization and Brahman realization within. When you know Kṛṣṇa the person, you know everything. That's going to become very clear here. You know, if you know Kṛṣṇa, then you know Paramatma and you know Brahman. And it can't be said the other way around. If you know Brahman, you don't necessarily know Paramatma and you don't necessarily know Bhagavan, Sri Kṛṣṇa. We can go on and on about that, but let's not get too caught up in that right now. So now we're going to hear about Paramatma. And how a wise person who's controlled their senses and has heard spiritual knowledge and reflected on it, how they can develop a certain type of vision. That vision is going to be called Jnana Chakshusa, the eyes of knowledge. And with this vision, it becomes apparent to them that there's a divine plan and a divine presence behind all that we experience in this world that we're moving through, this virtual reality that we're moving through. Now, if we go back to chapter 7, verse 7. You may remember this. We've spoken about it several times. But there's a verse there where Kṛṣṇa says, Mayi sarvam idam protam sutre manigana iva. That everything rests upon me as pearls are strung upon a thread. Right? When we see a string of pearls, a string of beads, we can't see the string. But we look at it and we know, and in a sense we can say we see that there's a string there, right? Just because of the way they hang, we can understand, we can observe it. And even though the string is invisible, we can see that it's there. And so Kṛṣṇa is saying that with the eyes of knowledge, you can look at this world, and although that divine being, that Paramatma, may be invisible to us, we can see the Paramatma. We can see the Paramatma everywhere, working through nature, working through the laws of nature, and really connect. So these verses are going to encourage us to contemplate how behind material nature, there's a divine thread a personal presence that's directing everything according to its own divine purpose. So let's get started now. Texts 1 through 6 give this, it gives a wonderful analogy and then it expands on it. And we hear, when we read Vedānta, when we read the Vedic text, when we hear a lot of Eastern philosophy, we often hear about how this world is an illusion. And what exactly does that mean? Here we get a really practical way to understand it. And that is through this analogy of the banyan tree. Verse 1 and 2 begin the chapter with a metaphor comparing the material world that we're living in to an upside down banyan tree with like a complicated network of branches. And this, why upside down? Why is the tree upside down? Where do we see an upside down tree? And commentators like Srila Prabhupada in his wonderful commentary to this verse, he explains that we see an upside down tree in a reflection, right? And so I'm trying to put together a little piece of artwork here for this. But yes, if you're standing on one side of a pond and you're looking at a tree on the other side, especially if it's very near the pond, then you will see the reflection of that tree on the surface of the water, right? And there we see an upside down tree. So this is a way, it's an implication that our world is, in a sense, a reflection with a complicated network of sense objects in which we become lost or bound. The banyan tree, if you've had the good fortune to see one before, especially a big one, it's the most entangled tree you can imagine. It's got lots and lots of branches, and many of those branches go back down into the ground and become like new trunks. And it's like some of these banyan trees are incredibly, like, super huge. Like the world's largest tree in terms of spreading out is a banyan tree. And so the banyan can be seen as, again, a complicated network. Now, here's what we're told about the banyan tree of the world that we're living in. One, that it's upside down, that it's a reflection. And this in itself is important because it indicates that what does a reflection indicate to us? Whenever we see a reflection of anything, it means that the real thing also exists, right? You don't see a reflection of something that doesn't exist. If you see a reflection of something, then the real substance must exist. And so it's saying that if this world is a reflection, then there must be a real realm that is the source of this reflection. In other words, there's a spiritual realm. This world is the material realm. It's upside down, right? Reflections are also kind of they appear very similar to the source that's being reflected, but they're totally backwards or totally upside down, right? Which is also very interesting. That means that the nature of this world, in one sense, is very similar to the world that's being reflected, or the spiritual world, but it's backwards. Everything's backwards. So much could be said about this, but let's just start there with that. It's saying that this world is a reflection. It's saying that one who understands this reflection understands the Vedas, right? When you get a clear understanding of this world and how it functions, you've learned what the Vedas are teaching. It says that its twigs are the objects of sense desire. It's everywhere we turn, there's promises of enjoyment in unlimited varieties. You can't count the twigs on a banyan tree, and you can't count all the different ways that we're trying to enjoy this world. And its source, it mentions that its source cannot be perceived in this world, nor where it begins, ends, or its foundation, right? We're floating around in this universe on a planet, spinning around through it. We don't know where it all came from. We can't see its source. We don't know where it begins, where it ends. Science still can't answer these questions. We don't know what its foundation is. Only through the Vedas can you learn this. And then it says that one should cut down this tree. In other words, one should cut free from the entanglement. And how do you do that? With the weapon of detachment, right? It's with detachment that detachment is born of knowledge. Understand what it is and then let it go. And then it says that once you've become detached, you don't just end there. It's not once you've let go of the material world, you float in nirvana for eternity. Once you become detached, then that gives you the platform from which one can, and what it says to do is one should seek out the reflection source and take shelter of and the words it uses are the Adyam Purusham, the original person. from whom everything has extended. This chapter is going to be called the Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the supreme person. This is Paramatma realization. Brahman realization means I realize that I'm not this body. I realize that I'm not this mind. I realize that all these temporary ideas of identity, of who I am, and all these ideas of what will make me happy, any external thing, all that's illusion. None of it's true. Brahman realization means I fully get that. And then I develop a peaceful, even mind. No matter what's happening around me, I'm steady. That's Brahman realization. I realize that I am the eternal spark who is beyond the constant shiftings of this material realm. That's Brahman realization. Paramatma realization is that there is a being superior to me from which this world emanates and by which this world is permeated. That within every atom and within the heart of every living being, including my own, that there's a divine consciousness, a form of Vishnu, right? Who's spread out through the entire thing and who's directing it all. That's Paramatma realization. So this is saying, go and find that person, right? Once you develop that peaceful mind and let go of everything, go and take shelter of the Adi Purusha, of the original Purusha, and connect with that person, right? So how do we do that? Text 5 is going to help us, give us a clue about how we can do that. It's going to give some qualifications for how to develop this vision of seeing the divine person, seeing the thread that's holding everything together, seeing Lord Vishnu behind everything. And it gives a list of things that we need to let go of, right? Let go of false prestige. Let go of the illusion that arises from our material attachments. Let go of lust, or you could say let go of our material desires. And let go of the dualities of happiness and distress. Cultivate being even-minded no matter what's happening externally, through knowledge, through reflection. And if you can do this, then these people have the potential to reach the Padam Avyayam. Right? This word Avyayam is used several times in this chapter. This is a word straight out of the Upanishads that describes the eternal, the absolute, right? One can achieve that eternal situation. And the Vaishnavas understand that it's Kṛṣṇa saying, and he'll say it many times and throughout the Bhagavad-gītā, my abode, you can come to my place, beyond this material world, out of the virtual reality. Okay, so in text 6, to wrap up this section, Kṛṣṇa describes that abode, right? He says, that supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. It's self-luminous. Right? Those who reach it never return to this material world. Okay, now contrast. What about those people in this world? Let's hear about them. And let's hear about the different ways that they see this world. Those that see it, those who have the eyes of knowledge and those that don't. And we'll begin hearing about those that don't. It says this is text 7. The living entities in this world are my eternal fragmental parts. This is a very clear indication of who we are, right? We are part of God, but we're not God. We're and it's not that we're temporarily separated and then we merge back in. Sanatana, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, is saying that we are eternally fragmental parts. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind, right? They're plugged into senses, just like into a virtual reality, and they have programming, which we can call here this conditioned life. And we're convinced that I need to satisfy these senses, and when the senses are satisfied, I'm happy, even though the happiness doesn't come. And when the senses are not satisfied, I'm really unhappy. We're struggling like that, trying to enjoy the external virtual world through the senses. Text 8. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. So now what's Kṛṣṇa saying, now look into the transmigration in this world. Look how we take birth in this world. Look how we exit this world, and try to see that within that material body, there's a more subtle being, the soul. And they quit one body and they take with them their subtle mind, and it's carried into the next body. And then he says in text 9, the living entity, thus taking another gross body, brought the mind over into the next physical body. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, attains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped around the mind. The mind is like a computer, and all these senses are like, well, you got your camera, which is the eyes, you got your microphone, which is the ears, et cetera, et cetera. Touchpad is the skin, and so on. And they're grouped around the mind, and thus they enjoy a particular set of sense objects, right? If I take birth as a human being, then I get senses that are very similar to what I have now. If I take, and programming similar, right? Although that, according to gender, according to race, according to where I'm born, all these different things may tune these senses in different ways through the mind. And but if I take birth as a dog, I get a whole different power of nose, right? It's like if I take birth as like a hawk or an eagle, I get I get eyes that have a much powerful potency, of vision and so on. So we're taking birth in different bodies with different senses, a certain type of ear, a certain type of eye, tongue, nose, sense of touch, etc., grouped around a mind. And thus I try to enjoy that. If I'm born in the body of a dog, I start to want what dogs want, and I start to chase that, thinking that's what's going to make me happy. We're being told, see all of this, right? Look at this, hear from the Vedic teachings, observe what's going on in the world around you, contemplate this and reflect on it. And then he says that very interesting in text 10, Vimudha nanu pasyanti. What does the word pasyanti means? To see, right? Vimudha nanu pasyanti. The fools na anu pasyanti. They cannot see this. Pasyanti jnana chakshusaha. But those that have the eyes of the knowledge can see this. They can see. The foolish can't see this, but those with the eyes of knowledge can. Why can't the foolish? It's mentioned gunanvitam, because they're under the spell of the gunas, of the three modes of material nature that we talked about yesterday. They're seeing that virtual reality screen, and just like all the people in the Matrix that were trapped in the virtual reality and they're convinced that it's real, people are moving through this world under the spell of the modes of material nature. They'll never see it. You need to develop the eyes of knowledge to see it. See it. Well, it's like if it's a thread, it's like invisible, right? How can you see it? But when you look at the pearls, you can see the thread, right? Because of your knowledge. Develop the knowledge and reflect on the knowledge so that it strengthens. And how can one, let's think about it, right? How could one look at this world and begin to see it? See that there's a soul living in the body that leaves the body and takes on a new body according to its karma. How can we see that and become convinced of that without doubt? And this is hearing from the Shastras, hearing from the sacred texts, and reflecting on it and observing. Think about it. A primary way of an example of how we're meant to cultivate this vision was given back in the text 212, back in the second chapter, right? Dehinos minyata dehe kaumaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tacha numuyati. Just look, even in this life, you've been in one body and in another body and then in another body. You've been in many bodies in one life, but your consciousness has remained the same. You remember living in previous bodies, even in this one lifetime. So why should you think that you're going to end at the end of this body? We've seen you've lived in many bodies already. Contemplate this. Think about it, right? There's things like prodigies, right? How does a person get born and suddenly effortlessly have all these skills? You look at a Mozart, right? That's not ordinary. How did that being suddenly develop this incredible musical talent? Well, the Vedic teachings of transmigration of the soul can explain it. Baby turtles, right? How are they born and instantly know, I need to run to the water fast, right? Because the Paramatma is within them, right? Telling them, now you're born in this body, this is what you need to do, right? You can write off, they have intuition. What do you mean by intuition? We've got an explanation for what intuition means, right? Sometimes we feel a sense of intense familiarity with a stranger, and suddenly we develop a lifelong bond, like instantly, right? It feels like we've always known each other, right? Sometimes there's, so many things, past life, children born with past life details that are inexplicable, right? There's a creative inspiration that people feel where it feels like we tap into it like a stream of information based on, something that's coming from beyond, something that's coming from some previous history that we lived. Sometimes we go to a place and we feel like, I feel so at home here, right? Sometimes some people have a moral intuition, right? They're born, maybe even they haven't been taught this, but they're born with a certain moral intuition about what is right and what is wrong, and they live very differently even than people around them. Where did it come from? So in many, many ways, we can begin to feel and see, and then continue reading these texts and continue reflecting on them, and this knowledge will become deeper and deeper ingrained in us. And eventually we develop these jnana chakshusa. We see through these eyes of knowledge. We see it everywhere. In text 11, Kṛṣṇa says the endeavoring transcendentalists, right? Endeavoring to develop these eyes, who are situated in self-realization, can see all this clearly. But those whose minds are not developed and who have not and are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. You can tell this to some people, they're like, get out of here, right? But to some people, it's like, it's so easy to see. All the pieces fit right together. Snap, 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 snap. And I can see this all going on. Okay. Now Kṛṣṇa is going to begin to say about seeing this in nature. See me working behind the law of karma through transmigration was the previous verses. Now make an effort to see me in see me, although I may be invisible to you, see me in what you can see, right? In nature, right? Make an effort to see me there. He says, this is similar to some things that we've heard before, right? Text 12, the splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. And the splendor of the moon and the splendor of the fire are also me. I'm the person in them, right? I'm the person supporting them. They are my energy. Text 13, I enter into each planet, right? How does the planet stay floating? Right? There's got to be something holding it up there. How does the pearl stay strung on the thread? We all can look at it and say, there's got to be a thread. There's got to be something holding it up. How does the planet stay up? Kṛṣṇa says, it's me, right? I enter into each planet, and by my energy, they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. I am the fire of digestion in the body of all living entities. And I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foods. And then this, right? Here's the part, classic Paramatma verse. I'm seated in everyone's heart. And from me become remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Hey, little turtle, run, right? It didn't learn that. Nobody taught it. It didn't go to a class on it or attend a seminar on it. There was no even mother around here to say, run. No, I'm in the heart of every living being. And from me comes knowledge, remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Forgetfulness, yes. You want to forget me and try to enjoy the virtual world without knowing that it's virtual, you want to accept it as real, I can give you the forgetfulness, right? You'll forget that you're not that body. You'll forget that you're eternal. You'll forget your previous lives. You'll forget it all so that you can continue to try to enjoy the illusion. He says, I am seated in everyone's heart. From me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. This is real important now in relation to Vedanta. By all the Vedas, what is to be known? I am to be known. Right? Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So in these verses, Kṛṣṇa is indicating that one can know things as they are, even as they move through this world of illusion, by seeing the presence of God, by seeing the presence of Kṛṣṇa, the presence of the Paramatma in the miracles of life that surround us at every moment, from the splendors of the cosmos to the most fundamental aspects of life, like eating and digesting. And with this crucial yogic understanding that God is within me at every moment. Okay, now we come towards the end of the chapter. 16 through 20 will deal with Kṛṣṇa coming right out and saying, I am the person, right, supporting it all. I am the supreme person. I am the Purushottama. He begins by speaking about other types of persons. He says there are two, this is text 16, there are 2 classes of beings. Or he uses the word Purushas. right? Two classes of persons, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living being is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. What different acharyas explain this in slightly different ways, but we can understand it simply like this. Those that are identifying with the body in the material world are fallible because they're placing their faith and their energy and their efforts with infallible energy that is sure to fall apart and disintegrate and ultimately fail. Whereas the infallible ones, even if they are living in this world, they're living in the spiritual world because all their investment is going into the spiritual energy, which is infallible, right? We've heard earlier in the second chapter, any endeavor in this, right? There's no loss or diminution, right? It's you're working, even though you're in a material body, in a material world, you're operating on the spiritual level. So that kind of person becomes infallible. But then Kṛṣṇa says in text 17, besides these two, there is the greatest living person, the Uttama Purusha, the supreme soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered into the three worlds and is maintaining them. Here he uses the word Avyaya Ishvara, the imperishable Lord. This word, this Avyaya, we mentioned it earlier. We mention it again. In the Upanishads, the absolute is commonly described as Avyaya, signifying that it does not undergo birth, decay, and death, unlike the transient things of this material world. So this term, Avyaya, it encapsulates the immutability of Brahman, that Brahman never changes. Kṛṣṇa is saying, I am that person that's Avyaya, right? You thought Avyaya always referred to non-personal energy. I am telling you that I am the Uttama Purusha that is Avyaya, that never changes, right? It's not that Krishna's body is an illusion. He says, no, it's eternal and it's imperishable. Now, now we get to these last three verses, 18, 19, and 20. In 3 verses, Kṛṣṇa is going to clear up any kind of confusion, right, that's there in Vedanta. It's really some mic drop moments here and some powerful languages used in powerful verses. Let's dive right in. I also wanted to share. Oh, no, here. Yeah, text 18. Kṛṣṇa now is just going to be focusing tighter and tighter upon himself as the object of knowledge, as the object of Vedanta, right? So in text 18, let's read it. He says, because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as the supreme person. Okay. This is very important. He's saying, in other words, and this is something I've been talking about throughout the Gita, but it's getting really clear here and really, I use the word incessant. An incessant message is being shared incessantly here, again and again and again. And it's getting so adamant and explicit at this point. The words Kṛṣṇa uses here, earlier in the 15th verse, just a few verses back, he said, Vedaischa sarver, by all the Vedas. That means the Upanishads, right? Also, you could say that means the Vedanta Sutra, which is the summary of the Upanishads. By not just by some of the Vedas. You could say yes by the rare and obscure Gopal Tapani Upanishad Kṛṣṇa is spoken about, but no. He's saying here by Vedaischa sarver, by all the Vedas, aham eva vedyo. What is to be known? What are all of those? What is the object of knowledge of all the Vedas? He says, aham eva vedyo. Aham, I am, eva, certainly, vedyo, the object to be known, right? By all the Vedas, what is to be known? I am to be known. That's a powerful statement. That, in other words, if I'm reading in the Vedas about that which is avyaya, if I'm reading in the Vedas about that which is eternal, if I'm reading and thinking it must be the impersonal Brahman, he's saying, no, it all goes to me. That impersonal Brahman is me, and I am avyaya, right? In this verse, he uses these terms. Aksharam, the imperishable, unchanging essence. Atitaha, the transcendental, beyond all temporal phenomenon, and Uttamaha, the supreme, the highest reality. These are the terms that are commonly used. You'll find them in the Mundaka Upanishad, in the Chandogya Upanishad, in the Katha Upanishad, in the Vedanta or Brahma Sutras. This is the language of the Shruti. This is the language of Vedanta. And Krishna's taking all that language that people may have used, interpreting it to indicate something impersonal, and saying they all apply to me. Right? He says, Atismi loke vede cha pratita purushottamaha. Therefore, I am celebrated. What are the Upanishads celebrating when they talk about that which is eternal and transcendental and supreme? They're celebrating me. Therefore, I am celebrated both in this world and Vedecha and in the Vedas, right? As the Pratita Purushottamaha, as the supreme person. That's me. Now, text 19 and 20. These are the mic drop moments, right? Text 19. Yo mam eva asam mudho janati purushottamaha. Whoever knows me thus, right? Whoever knows mam, me thus, as the supreme person, the Purushottama, right? Asamudho. Prabhupada translated this as without doubting. Another way to translate it is undiluted. One who is undiluted and knows that I am the supreme person. Sasarvavid. They know everything. Bhajanti mam. And they worship and serve me. Sarva bhavena. With complete love in every respect. Advaita Vedantins will say that knowing Krishna is knowing something good, and it's a good step to move forward to know what's beyond him, which is the impersonal absolute, the avyaya, that which is beyond him. Krishna say, no. When you know me everything. You know Brahman, you know Paramatma, you know Bhagavan, because all of it is within me, right? So I'll read the full translation. Whoever knows me as the supreme personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service, sarva bhavena, with full bhava, with full feeling, with full love, right? And now text, I love this verse, text 20. Iti guyatamam shastram. This knowledge, what I just spoke to you, that behind all the workings of the world, behind the sun, behind the moon, behind your power of digestion, behind the law of karma that's moving every soul from one body to another, right? In the heart of every living being, behind it all is this person, Krishna, who you can, and when you know him, you serve him with a heart full of love. That knowledge, he says, iti guyatamam shastram. This is the most confidential secret of all the Vedic literature. Guyam, right? We heard earlier in the 9th chapter, Krishna said, Raja Guyam, I'm going to tell you the king of all secrets, about me, the person behind everything, and the object of all devotion. Now he's saying it again, even more emphatically. This is Guya Tamam. Guya means secret, confidential teaching. Uttamam, the highest of them, the most confidential secret of the Shastram, of all the Shastras, of all the sacred texts. Idam Uktam Mayanaga. It is disclosed now by me to you, O sinless Arjuna. Etat Budva Buddhimam Syat. Whoever understands this will become wise. Krita Krityas Bharata, and their endeavors will know perfection, O Arjuna. Right? This is the most confidential part of all the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. What a chapter. So how can it be more clear? What does Krishna have to say to make it more clear? He's saying it again and again, and here he's just said, you think there's something beyond me, something beyond devotion? No. This, knowing that I'm behind everything, and serving me with a heart full of love, that's the greatest confidential teaching of all the Shastras. Know it for sure. Know it without doubt. Right? Beautiful chapter. Try to see Krishna behind everything. right? Look everywhere you look, develop these eyes of knowledge, learn this knowledge from Bhagavad-gītā, reflect on it as you go through your day, as you go through your life, see through the eyes of knowledge, see Kṛṣṇa working behind everything, and develop a love for him in your heart and serve him with a heart full of love, and you will have achieved the greatest accomplishment, the greatest yogic accomplishment, because you know the greatest secret, the most confidential teachings of all the Vedas. Chapter 15, Purushottama Yoga, the yoga of the Supreme Person. Love it. Thank you very much. Hari Om Tat Sat.